With a summit between the leaders of South Korea and the United States expected to take place in Washington this month, it's set to be a major test for President Lee's foreign policy. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Andrew Millard, Assistant Professor of International Relations at Changwon National University. Professor Millard, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
So, security issues are expected to top the agenda when Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump meet, right? So, the two countries' defense chiefs recently talked about a modernized alliance in their recent phone call. What does this mean for the two countries' security cooperation?
Right. So, yes, we've just finished the trade deal. That all seems to be going ahead quite nicely, which means security issues is the main issue left on the table. Now, when they talk about this modernized alliance, what we have to remember is South Korea and the US have had this security, this mutual defense treaty for more than 70 years. But when this treaty was signed back in 1953, obviously South Korea was very weak back then. Over the past 70 years, South Korea has developed economically, technologically, and also industrially. And so basically what the US is saying is that treaty we had 70 years ago, it doesn't fit with the modern industrial economy of South Korea. And basically they're going to look at readdressing the balance of the security relationship between America and Korea. And they're really going to look and say, South Korea these days has not only the capability, but also the capacity to defend itself. And therefore, maybe the US doesn't need to play such a major role in security in South Korea. So basically, it's not an end to the security relationship in any way. It just means readdressing the balance and potentially maybe shifting some of the wartime operational control back to South Korea.
I see. And another major security issue is the burden sharing issue for U.S. forces Korea. As Trump has repeatedly said, South Korea needs to pay more for defense costs. What do you think South Korea must secure at a minimum in the negotiations, given Trump's unpredictability?
Right. So again, when the US say, oh, South Korea needs to be paying more for security, this is not just specific to South Korea. This is a general global sort of strategy that the Trump administration is pushing. So if we look at Europe also, they're also pushing the Europeans to pay more. So we need to look at the whole wide picture and sort of recognize that. But as we just said, South Korea, it now is capable and it is spending much more on defense. So what South Korea really needs to do is show America that it is committed to supporting the US. It is willing to spend more on its defense, but in return, it also needs to try to get America to maintain as strong a US force in South Korea as possible. So after 70 years, if Donald Trump can be a little bit unpredictable, if he suddenly says, oh, South Korea is strong enough, it has the capability, it has the capacity, we don't need to be there, and suddenly reduces the US forces significantly, then that could create a lot of problems for South Korea. So the minimal that South Korea needs is to have a reduced force, but on the minimal side and on a fairly slow phase out, if at all.
Right, and there's also been a report that the two sides may discuss South Korea's role in case of a Chinese attack on Taiwan. Could the Taiwan issue also be on the agenda when they do meet?
Oh, without doubt. So we're not only looking at South Korea. Again, what the US administration is looking at is they're looking at the wider Indo-Pacific region, and we're looking at the various different security agreements that are in place. So we have the US, Japan, South Korea trilateral agreement, but that's the only one that South Korea is involved in. There's other separate ones. So there's the Quad, so the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, then there's AUKUS. South Korea is not a part of this. So the US is looking at South Korea and say, are they really committed to not only defense of the Korean Peninsula, but are they going to support the US in Taiwan? or in other areas of the region if there is some sort of conflict.
See, and on North Korean issue, North Korea has said, the personal relationship between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump are not bad, but it's not going to give up its nuclear weapons. What's your take on a possible meeting between Kim Jong-un and Trump? Do you think they'll be able to meet again?
So firstly, I agree, nuclear weapons, they will not be eliminated. In terms of a possible meeting, I think right now the chances have increased because in South Korea, we do now have the democratic government in office, and usually they're more pro-North Korea. So that's a very positive change. And also Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in the past have had a good relationship. However, the big difference now between Donald Trump's first term in office is that the war in Ukraine has started, and with the war in Ukraine, North Korea has very much aligned itself with Russia. And so it's going to have to really look at this relationship with Russia. Is a meeting with Donald Trump possibly going to change or alter that relationship with Russia? How would Vladimir Putin react to some sort of meeting? So there are a few more differences in the current system.
I see a lot of things to consider there. We'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Millard, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.